Super large phones until now have been the exclusive domain of Android. We've seen the Galaxy Note series blur the tablet and phone lines with their 5 point something inch screens, and then the Galaxy Mega and HTC One Max really pushed the boundaries. Now the Nokia Lumia 1520 has entered the fray, ready to put its own stamp on the XL phone trend. It's the biggest and brightest Lumia, but now we need to know if it's among the best. I'm Andrew with mobileburn.com, and to answer that question. Alright, here's a confession. I hate the word phablet because it's so foolish and unnecessary, but the Nokia Lumia 1520 validates the word. It's not enough to say that this is simply a phone. With a 6-inch display and a body this large, this definitely pushes the boundary between phone and tablet in a way that most devices don't. And to tell you the truth, this isn't the first XL Lumia, but it is the first to have the all-important 1080p HD display. And believe me, that's very important. It makes a difference. The Lumia 1520 has a remarkable screen that's ridiculously bright, and it's sharp, and it's clear because of the resolution. It's an IPS LCD, and it looks great no matter where you are. But the problem is it annoyingly doesn't let you adjust brightness on a sliding scale like you can do with Android or iOS. You pretty much only have 3 levels. And even at the low and medium levels, it's still a very bright screen, so it's highly visible indoors or outdoors. Then you throw in Nokia's tweaks for sunlight readability and increased touch sensitivity. Plus, you can actually change the color profile if you go into the settings. So you can make it a little warmer or a little cooler depending on which type of color profile you prefer. When you factor those things in, it's hard to imagine a scenario in which the screen doesn't look good. I've watched episodes of Downton Abbey on there. I've read articles online. I've looked at that giant screen for navigation. And no matter which activity I did, it looked as good as I could have hoped. If there's a way that it looks bad, I haven't found it yet. Unfortunately, Nokia's behemoth doesn't feel as good, mainly because there's so much of it to touch. I know I'm harping on that this is a big phone, but you have to understand. Imagine the biggest phone you can think of. Increase it a little bit more, boom, you've got the Lumia 1520. It measures 6.41 by 3.36 by 0.34 inches. Now that's a little bit taller and wider than the Galaxy Note 3. And the Galaxy Note 3 is already pushing it on the large scale. So when you factor in a device bigger than that, it's kind of hard to overlook that. A huge portion of smartphone buyers will take one look at the 1520, pick it up, cast it aside because the thought of lugging that thing around is ludicrous. Unless you're someone who is thirsted for a colossal device, the 1520 is just too damn big. But if you're still watching this, there's a chance that you're one of those people who can handle and actually want one of those large devices. And once you get past the large size of the 1520, there's actually a lot of it to like. There's a lot of good things about the phone. The matte finish that's common on Lumia phones feels fantastic here. But if you get the red color, it's going to be a little more of a glossy plastic feel. Otherwise, if you get the matte finish, you won't have any issues. Now, it has those sharp to round edges that try to make handling the phone a little bit easier, but it's still going to be a challenge when you have to reach up to certain parts of the screen. But I will note that otherwise, if you can handle the phone, it's going to be very good. This isn't a one-handed device. You're going to need 2 hands, but once you get those 2 hands comfortable, it's going to be pretty good. Other hardware factors that you have to consider, this is grade A awesome by smartphone standards when it comes to the speakers. The speakers are loud and clear for music, podcasts, phone calls, everything. And another great aspect of the hardware is that despite AT&T weakening it down to 16 gigabytes of storage, you can finally expand your memory with a 64 gigabyte micro SD slot. How long have you waited to see that on a Lumia? The large display makes it possible to do some interesting things with Windows Phone. For instance, the Live Tiles now has a 3rd row where you can show the snippets of information and personalize your apps list. Now, some might prefer a dedicated notification center, myself included, but at the same time, if you do like Live Tiles, the 1520 is going to attract you because you can pack more information because of the software changes. And while we're on the subject of software changes, I have to point out that this is the first time I'm reviewing a Windows Phone that I can't say Instagram isn't available, because it is. And yes, the app is still in beta and very limited, but at the same time, progress has been made. And you can say the same thing about Vine, Redbox Instant, and a few other apps that Nokia lobbied to come onto Windows Phone. We get it, Windows is always going to lag behind Android and iOS. That's not something that's going to change for the next 2 years. But aside from having app envy, that's fading away. It's turning more into feature envy. If you can deal with waiting for features to come, then it's going to be tolerable. But if you're someone who's locked into the Microsoft ecosystem, you might not even care about most of these apps that people clamor for. So for you, it's not going to matter to you. Think about it this way. If you need to do a spreadsheet for your work, you don't care about having Instagram. You want to have that Excel sheet, and it's going to look a lot better on that 6-inch 1520 than it will on an iPhone 5S. So if you can deal with the subpar YouTube mobile site and the poor support that Google has for Windows Phone, it's going to be much easier for you to use a Lumia 1520. And one of the reasons that the software experience feels better, aside from having more choices, is that you now have more powerful hardware. There's a Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 quad-core processor with 2 gigabytes of RAM in the Lumia. Now, remember how I previously said Windows Phone doesn't really need quad-core processors? That's still true, but you're still going to appreciate having the option. When you look at the phone, you'll notice that app loading times are a little bit shorter, the Nokia camera is a little bit faster, and the performance overall is just a tiny bit smoother, to the point that the newer Snapdragon leaves its mark. Animations are still a little bit slow when you're going on the start screen, but scrolling is efficient. The loading circles that plagued the previous phones are pretty much gone for the most part. They're still going to be there, but it's not going to be as long. The camera is another pleasing factor. At 20 megapixels, it's capable of using the same oversampling techniques that you saw on other Nokia handsets. So it takes large photos with great detail. And it's obviously not as retroactively zoom friendly as the 1020, but the Lumia 1520 still has a camera that's great for capturing images. Adjusting white balance and exposure continues to be an issue because the Nokia camera app is a little aggressive in those areas, but at the same time, it tends to read situations well and offers the controls to correct the camera in those instances when it doesn't. And because of that quad-core processor, users will find that the camera moves a little bit faster than it does on the 1020. So knowing that it has that great camera and all the other praise that I've lobbed at the Lumia 1520, it's pretty obvious I think this is the best that Nokia has done since moving to Windows. However, there is an asterisk next to that title. It's the best Lumia if you can handle dealing with the massive phone. I know I spent a lot of time talking about how this has a gigantic frame, but it's hard not to. You have to understand, I felt very uncomfortable trying to use a device this big in the tight spaces of New York. And it's too big for one-handed use, so I never really felt at ease trying to hold this while I'm standing in line or walking through a store looking at a grocery or shopping list. Unless you've been clamoring for a large device running Windows Phone, the 1520 probably isn't going to be for you. I love the display, I love the performance boost that you get, but at the same time, it's hard to manage this without 2 dedicated hands. If you're someone capable of overlooking those shortcomings, or even different, you're someone who thrives off those large size devices, the 1520 is going to be as effective as it is big. You've got that big display, solid battery life, and a good camera. If you wanted an XL smartphone with an extraordinary large display and a more mature version of Windows Phone 8, congratulations. The Lumia 1520 is your dream come true. For everyone else, it's just the same story, just a bigger version and told a little bit better. I'm Andrew with mobileburn.com, and I hope you found this video helpful, and if so, feel free to click like and subscribe. Also, be sure to click the link in the description below so you can see photo and video samples of the Lumia 1520. That's all for now, so until next time, thanks for watching.